Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to have you here. Aaron Thompson is my name, if you don't know who that is. I just want to announce openly and freely we're not interested in having a system in Kentucky, just to let you know. So if you're, we had that opportunity last year with our Senate Joint Resolution, and we said no. We work really well the way we are. Can we get better? Yes, and that's what we hope to do. But the richness of what we have in Kentucky, I have to admit, is one that's been recognized nationally. We have been considered to be a non-system that operates better than most systems. So we're happy with that. So let me be clear, no matter what you thought you heard this morning, we're not interested in a system. We are interested in having the boards of our campuses be as talented and as educated as they possibly can be, and we love our presidents, as I'll say good stuff about them here in a second. So I do want to welcome you to this trusteeship conference. Tomorrow I'll have a chance to go over the state of Kentucky, if you want to call it that. A lot of great news to share, but also some opportunities that we'll share. And this luncheon plenary is one that gives us an opportunity to really focus on, some of the things we've done so far, but I'm going to ask these folks, they don't even know I'm going to ask them, to do some predictions about where we're going in Kentucky, where their campuses are going, and how we can work together even better to help us all to get there. So it's good to have you here. I want to introduce our panelists, and I'll give them a chance, since we're starting a few minutes early, believe it or not, to give us just a little bit of information about who they are individually, in case you don't know who they are, and a little bit about how they see their leadership journey on the particular campuses that they occupy. And obviously, we're going to start with the talented side. Dr. McFaddin said if I said that, he would no longer give me an EKU shirt, but maybe Northern and Louisville will. We'll start with you. Ken.
Thanks so much, President Thompson. My name's Kim Schatzel.
Is that on? I can't hear. Is that on? Yeah. I'm a technology genius, by the way.
Testing. Yes? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. My name's Kim Schatzel. I'm the president of the University of Louisville. I've been here since February 2023. I would say the fact that, one of the things I did as a new president, I think a lot of new presidents will say this, I went on a listening tour, and I actually had almost 40 sessions and talked to over 1,600 people, both on and off campus, as well as throughout the state. And there was a couple of things that I thought were remarkable. One was the passion that people felt for the University of Louisville. I can't tell you how many times I was in a room to be able to ask people if they were an alumni or they had a family member that was an alumni. 3/4 of the room raised their hands, and just the incredible passion and impact that the university made on so many people's lives. But one of the things that I learned is the fact as I went around the state is that we really wanted to partner more. And in fact, I've got two presidents that are sitting with me right now that we are partnering on programs. So I always call it the tyranny of the or versus the harmony of the N. We are Louisville, but we also are a university that wants to be able to engage across the Commonwealth itself. So I think that's something that I really feel strongly about, and that's really been adopted and embraced very, very strongly by the campus itself.
So I'm Cady Short-Thompson, and I am the new president of Northern Kentucky University. I say new for the next 2 weeks until I have my 1-year anniversary there. So I've made it almost a year, and in all seriousness, for me, this position and this opportunity is about returning home. What makes me unique, I think, is that I actually started my career at NKU as a faculty member in the late 90s, and then left to lead elsewhere at a number of other institutions, and am now home again. And having spent all but 4 years in Cincinnati and in Northern Kentucky, for me, this is just a great opportunity to return home to a place I love, an institution I love, and the place that really formed me. as a professional. So I will say that what also makes me unique is the commitment I have to the region itself and my knowledge and relationships in the region. So there's a lot more familiar for me and within my leadership than I think a typical new president would have in terms of not just on campus and the culture, but also in the whole region of Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. So lots of big things ahead of the university. I'm just really excited to be there.
Good afternoon. Are we on? All right, there we go. I'm David McFaddin. I'm the 14th president of Eastern Kentucky University. I will be entering year 5 of my presidency, year 15 of my time back at Eastern Kentucky University. I'm the first alum of the institution who is from the region that we serve to serve as president of the institution. I'm a first-generation college student. I think you'll hear Dr. Jackson maybe echo some of those remarks for him. But I'm also a bit of a non-traditional president, as I spent the first 13 years of my career working in the private sector. And Ron Gohagan can tell you all of those tales over here, as I worked for one of the largest telecom providers in the world. But being back at Eastern for the last 15 years, it has been a transformative experience. As I think about my own journey and the impact of education, we talk about the fact that you can't be what you can't see. And as we think about, as the School of Opportunity, serving more Kentuckians per capita as part of our student body than any other institution, putting those graduates back to work in our communities, we want to be a part of the solution. I think we heard this morning talking about the process is very important, but we have to be solutions focused as well. And so eager to have the conversation today to talk about what it is we can do to move Kentucky forward, that we can move our institutions forward, that we can serve you. As I think about all the trustees out here, our goal here is to try to make sure we are listening to your guidance to implement those things, because your boots on the ground in each of those communities, and so we want to be very responsive to that. And despite what Dr. Thompson said, we do hold that emeritus status for you, so I don't know if you can get that anywhere else, but we're grateful to have Dr. Thompson leading CPE as a proud EKU graduate.
David, thank you. I'm Bob Jackson. I'm the 14th president of Murray State University, and it's good to see everyone. Many of you I know, and some of you I've known a long time, and others in here, and so it's good to see you. I've been in this job since August of 2018, so in one sense a long time, and another not. The pandemic period, I think we can all count that as 7, 8, or 9 or 10 years as well. So many of us have served through that, and we've served a long time. I think, as most of you here are trustees and regents of your respective institutions, take great pride. We all get along. The presidents spend a lot of time together. We spend a lot of time together with Dr. Thompson, who does a fantastic job leading the CPE, as well as all of us planning together, working together, making sure we advance Kentucky together. And, shall we never forget that. That's why we're all here. And there's a lot of work ahead of us, as we talked about in the last breakout session also. But it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the discussion, Dr. Thompson, and it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. I will tell you, though, just to pick up on Dr. McFaddin, one of the best jobs I've ever had is to be a faculty member on a college campus. And being back at my alma mater was especially grand for me, so I am an emeritus and proud of that. Let's talk a little bit about, since the last time we had this conference, which was in 2022. I will tell the audience that during the COVID time, the presidents and myself, we met at least once a week, fairly often more than that, and everybody showed up. And I'm proud of what we did during that time to put Kentucky at the top of the way we provided a healthy sort of student atmosphere as well as faculty and staff, but we still got work done. I'd like to hear a little bit from each of you. By the way, any of the presidents in the audience could also answer this question easily. But what has happened since COVID? What's happened on your campus that you would significantly point out that would show that we've been innovative and going in the right direction? We'll just start with you, Dr. Jackson.
Well, happy to. So I think the pandemic period was a period where we learned a lot about ourselves individually, but also we learned a lot about our institutions and the importance of being prepared. And none of us were probably as prepared as we'd like to have been at that point in time. We got prepared quickly, however. A lot of changes came from that period of time, and that's a period of history. Hopefully that's once every 100 years, Dr. Capilouto, and it's not more often than that, because I'm not sure any of us who have been through that period of time could stand it again. But also we learned a lot about healthcare and how it operates on our campus. We learned a lot about mental health and how mental health works in a better way, especially with our students, and responding to that going forward. We learned a lot about course modality. And while I'm a firm believer in the best learning happens with a professor in front of a class of students, I think we also learned that you can be successful online, hybrid, and otherwise. We learned that Zoom can be a tool that benefits all of us. I have made thousands of trips from Murray, Kentucky to the state capitol and central Kentucky over a 30-plus year history of doing this type of work. And now we've had many meetings by Zoom, both legislatively and CPE-related meetings, and it's a tool that benefits us. To drive 4 hours each way and have a 30-minute meeting or an hour meeting is probably not the best use of our time. We're all busy and high-paid individuals, and we need to be on our campuses. There's a lot of other things I could rattle on in regard to that, but I think probably lastly, it taught us to think ahead further and be prepared. Be prepared. I don't know what's next, but there's something that's next. And trying to be prepared as we best can be in regard to those types of issues will serve us all well. I still, lastly, I'll close with this, but Jordan Smith is in front of me. He was our COVID czar on our campus. We all appointed someone for that role. And a few days ago, I happened to look at that book we put together, getting through the pandemic and how we were responding in all areas, healthcare-wise, mental health care-wise, academically, and otherwise. And I didn't read through very much of it because I didn't want to relive most of those days. But it reminded me how hard we had to work as institutions to advance Kentucky, because we still had work to do. We didn't shut down, and we didn't stop educating students, and we moved forward, just like all of our colleagues do.
I think Dr. Jackson touched on really some of the hallmarks that came out of the COVID pandemic. Time, place, and manner of how we deliver higher education changed in ways that we couldn't imagine. Prior to the pandemic, often you had to incentivize or entice or really encourage faculty on our campuses to really embrace online learning as a methodology of how they would teach. And now, frankly, it's a part of every course, and it's really changed it in that way. I think I might talk just a little more about, I think that the pandemic was a disruption, yes, but it was also an accelerant. And it really created an opportunity to enter the pandemic in one place and potentially exit in a very different place. And so, for us institutionally, what it was about is it really came down to culture, how we had to focus on communication, the thoroughness of that communication, the timeliness of that communication, the transparency of that communication was really important. And then there was such disruption to financial cycles as we saw, enrollment, and we saw federal funds and how we administered those funds. And of course, we administer a lot of Title IV funds, but having the HERF funds and seeing those funds flow in through the institutions was really a challenging thing, but it also gave you an opportunity to really be strategic. And so, looking at the pandemic and coming out, I think that probably all of us would say we're better for it because we really had a chance to reflect, to probably refine processes, to better understand who we are and why it is we do what we do. We also came to understand just the sheer amount of student support services that are necessary to help today's college students not just survive college, but to thrive in the college environment. And so I would say this, that the one observation I have today is that this freshman class this fall, the fall of 2024, seems to be what I remember a normal freshman class was like pre-2020. And so for those who are out there and have college-age students who are on campuses, and on our campus, it feels like maybe now we've got back to what normal is. But the new normal is defined by, I think, new innovations, a culture of being willing to embrace change, and understanding that you cannot control all of those things. And so institutionally, I think we're better for it. And I think the relationships amongst the institutions and with the council are better for it, because we worked hand in hand, as Dr. Thompson said, week in and week out to navigate this and really position Kentucky as the fastest growing higher ed enrollment state post-pandemic of any of the states in America. So that's a big success story.
He took my thunder away tomorrow, by the way. I'm going to repeat that.
So clearly, we've had a lot of shared experiences. I think all of us recognize, looking back to that time, that it's remarkable what you can do from your kitchen, right? I mean, how many of us were filming things and having people making breakfast and lunch behind us, and yet we carried on. And so as I look as a newcomer at NKU, there are a number of things that I can say that they have learned over that time. And one thing is that in 2018, NKU really started to offer a lot more online programming, and that has only accelerated over the last few years, in large part because it's in demand. I mean, there are a lot of our graduate programs, 87% of our graduate programs are now fully online at NKU. Additionally, it's an access issue, and we recognize it as such, and we know that we can do it well. And so now I think we've all started to lean into online for a number of other programs, and they're going well. I would say that our students are just a bit different right now. There are several ways in which we find ourselves working harder to interact with them, engage them. And so getting our students to engage in activities and events and fairs and other things on campus, woo, it's not just pizza anymore, friends. We need a lot more than pizza to draw folks out. And so we've gotten smarter about how to get people engaged on the campus. Another thing that's different on our campus is housing and what students want in housing. For many years, students really wanted roommates. They really don't want roommates anymore. They want a single, and then they want a community space. And that's just challenging us because we have spaces that are really designed for a different era. And so, we're working hard, I think, as a whole cabinet and a whole, team of faculty and staff to meet our students where they are. Thirdly, I would just say that mental health is definitely just something that we deal with every single day at the university, and we'll talk about it more in another question, I know, but I will say that anxiety and depression are far more of realities in our student population and colleague base than we experienced before COVID. So we continue to innovate and think a lot about wellness and well-being and how to engage one another well.
I agree with everything my colleagues have said, but the one thing that I will add is that, over the past recent years, we've heard a negative narrative around higher education, the value of a college degree, and higher education itself. I reflect back, and I'm like President McFaddin, I spent 20 years in business before I became an academic. I was an entrepreneur and a CEO and ran a multinational manufacturing company. And I have to tell you, higher ed, where they had to pivot in terms of what they had to do to continue providing the outstanding quality education and continue the research also. I mean, talk about people that were trying to do research that had to leave their labs or have to modify to that. People claim the fact that higher ed is, bureaucratic, it's calcified, it's not responsive. It takes us years to be able to adapt and to make change. That is absolutely wrong. The nimbleness that this industry showed and that my colleagues showed and the institutions of higher education showed in the state is remarkable. And we were leaders in terms of innovation during that most critical time. So I think that's an important thing to remember.
Thank you. Dr. Short-Thompson brought up mental health, and we're going to stay there for a second. Just to let you know, for those that don't know, Kentucky was the first state to get out in front of this. We started having the conversations before COVID, as these presidents will remember. And, I had done a listening tour around the state, and that kept popping up, back in 2018. People kept telling us, or students kept telling us, this is a crisis. And so we started having that conversation, actually invested some dollars before COVID in that regard. So we put a lot of things in place. Then with the GEAR money that the governor had, we got 13 plus million to kind of put into our campuses to help them to even build on a better way of triaging, better way of providing professional assistance. And now with some of our healthcare dollars, we're building more on that. With all that being said, we did put some things in place which are crucial. And I'm proud to say that we've been invited to a lot of national forums to talk about the way Kentucky did it. Gave a speech last week in a national forum on mental health. So I want to start over here. What are you all doing to sustain some of the things that we put in place back then?
So I can't say that these were in place back then, but I can say that at NKU, we've really been working hard to normalize attention to and service of folks that are having mental health crises. So, one of the things we've done is to make our therapy and counseling free of charge. And I think that removing barriers is really important. We've also invested in a service called Together All, which is a 24/7 hotline staffed by peer mentors and experts to help students through difficult times. The other thing I would say is that when I say we've been working hard to normalize it, I stood at our student convocation with our 1,800 incoming students and said, please pull your phones out, and gave them the numbers of these different services. So I want them to have those numbers on the ready, on their phones, whenever it is they need it. Because as you know, when you're in crisis, it can be hard to know the name of something or the right place to call. And so for me, it was really important as a mom of 3 college students for them to know that number and to know who to call when they need help. So we just have started to talk more about it than ever. And I do think that there will be long-term positive impacts from being willing to talk about it, regardless of the setting or the stage.
This past year, we actually hired our first Associate Vice President of Student Wellbeing to be able to create a high-level, senior-level position within the university to bring in best practice associated with well-being for the students. And it's really made a dramatic difference in terms of being able to engage the community, to be able to develop a strategy around supporting it. I also think, frankly, that it'll position us competitively in the marketplace to be able to have people that, when they're looking at choices for going to college, to know the fact that we invested and we believe so strongly that mental health and student well-being is a priority is an important aspect as well. We did a similar situation with regard to telehealth, and I think that's really important to realize, is the fact that mental health goes across the board in terms of circumstances. So to be able to have a 24/7 line where students can call and can be triaged is a really important aspect that so many of the universities are putting on to make sure that accessibility is not denied to a student, because at that moment, if they want to talk to somebody, that they can be able to reach out to do that. But I would encourage the fact that to take a look at what all the universities are doing is important. And, as my colleague said, normalizing mental health is very, very important on a campus. Being able to talk to the faculty about methods that they can respond to mental health and also report it, I think that's also important for us to be able to do. Many times you'll have faculty and staff with the best of intentions might want to counsel or want to provide support, when the best thing they can do is to be able to provide referral so that the students can reach professionals very early. We also installed Narcan on the campus. California state system put it as a requirement. We actually did it voluntarily. Unfortunately, it's 2024, but to be able to provide the fact that there's nasal spray to be able to respond to any type of overdose, and to have them in the residence halls, have them in the library, have them in various areas, if it saves one life, we know that it's worth it. And it's important to be able to do that as well as to be responsive.
I guess kind of building on that conversation, at Eastern Kentucky University, we've got a great academic history as it pertains to mental health. Our PsyD program, we have a doctorate in psychology, mental health practitioners. So we had really kind of 3 units, from student health to our student counseling center to our psychology clinic, which not only serves campus but serves the larger community with working professionals in that space. It really give us the chance to integrate that work in a way that had almost been siloed before. In fact, it was a necessity to kind of start to work in that direction. But I think that that integrated approach also started to point out some things where we needed to make sure that everybody on campus knew how to talk about the services that were on campus. Because without that uniform understanding of the services and the support, at times it could put an overburden on perhaps just one leg of the stool as it relates to wait times for counseling centers, or trying to see that when really a student is trying to figure out how to address, how to just deal with test anxiety. There's going to be some anxiety that goes on while being a college student. There's going to be some stress that goes on in that space. So we've started to adopt kind of a navigator approach to where we're trying to have that intercession that gets there maybe before you get with a professional in that space. If you're really trying to deal with what is the normal college experience, to make sure that we're helping you navigate that and using the resources that are there on campus. And then, of course, assessing if there is a specific mental health need to make sure we get you with the professional that you need in that space. But I think for all of us who have went through that experience, there's test anxiety, there is social anxiety, there are those things that are part of that natural maturing process that goes on during the college years. We've just got to make sure we're there to catch them when it's too much. And so finding that too much kind of breaking point is the key, I think, to having a sustainable and strategic and very effective set of programs that help students not only make their way to our institutions, but succeed and leave our institutions ready to go out and conquer the world.
So in closing, mental health services for our students, and as well as faculty and staff, but especially we'll focus on students for just a moment. We saw during the pandemic and now post-pandemic the tremendous need, and the need for mental health services has changed exponentially on all of our campuses. And so we have, at Murray State University, we've enhanced those services. We have a counseling center, we have a psychology center, mostly made up of graduate students. But basically, these services historically have been on most campuses an 8 to 4:30 operation for the most part. Well, what we learned during the pandemic, what we've learned thereafter is it's a 24/7, 365 need that's out there. And so we have started a telehealth, telemental health service where students can call on Saturdays or Sundays or Christmas Day. And they're licensed in all states, and our students travel. We have students from every state. We have students from 50 countries. We have students from all over Kentucky. So you've got to make sure you're addressing the licensure issues when you're addressing this important topic also. As President Schatzel mentioned as well, it's one of the most important issues, and it's one of the first issues a parent, a prospective parent, or a prospective student asks when they come on your campus. Physical health services, where's it located? Can they help in this respective area or not? And they'll list them. And mental health services. And we can talk about that in a broader and in a much deeper and a more thoughtful way today. So we learned a lot during the pandemic, and this particular issue was really a special light was shined on it during that time of the need and some of the areas where we lacked services. And so I think we've all enhanced them to a great degree, and I think it's benefited all of us, and I think it's benefited, most importantly, our students.
A couple points I want to make about what we've done in Kentucky and what's going on nationally that I think is important. One of the things we did in Kentucky early, we focused on the stigma, how to get rid of it, right? And that's especially true if you look at our minoritized populations. The stigma is even a little larger. So we focused on it in a culturally competent way, and I appreciate that. The other item I will tell you, if you read the Institute of Higher Ed Policy brief that talks about mental health looks like it's getting better. Well, maybe because we've got services that are a lot better, first of all, but I would argue not to get lost in some of those data, not nearly as much. And I appreciate Dr. McFaddin said this class looks more normal than it did before COVID, but please understand that still 80% of the reasons why people leave you are not academic, right? So those items are still in place. A couple other points that I'll make on this, and Allie Phillips, who's the chair of the student body, Board of Student Body Presidents, the student body came to us, you all remember, and told us their number one issue, and this was last year and the year before, number one issue that they were dealing with on campuses, kept giving us information and examples over and over again, was mental health. So stuff don't disappear in 2 or 3 years, right? We are doing a better job, but I would make sure that everybody understands this still has to be a top focus, along with some of the other items. Now, I'm going to ask you a double-barrel question here, and I'll just open it up. By the way, I plan on saving a few minutes toward the end for you folk to ask these wonderful people questions. Double-barrel question. We focus heavily on outcomes, performance, what I call the quantitative outputs, which are very important, and I'm proud of that, and I'll give you some data tomorrow to show how well we're doing. But we've also focused heavily on building the quality agenda around academic degrees. I'm a faculty member now for 37 years. I know I look younger. But, you know, people used to ask me, I said, I know I got quality going in my class. I'm not sure about everybody else. But we didn't have any tangible evidence to show that that was in place. So what we've done in Kentucky, we've got these employability skills around the graduate profile. I want you to talk a little bit about that for those who want to, because you all have been heavily engaged in this. And Kentucky was on the front end of bringing employers in to talk with us how to build some of the things we need to around this quality area. But then I just have to mention that since Dr. McFaddin once again brought up the enrollment piece, tell us the effect that FAFSA has had. The FAFSA, I didn't call it a debacle this time, Dr. Jackson. You noticed that? I will. Okay, has had on this fall enrollment for you. So double barrel question. I'll just open it up, whoever wants to go.
On the FAFSA?
On both of them. The idea of the 10 essential skills and FAFSA.
Two things very quickly. We all have wonderful institutions. Every president in here represents a wonderful institution, is playing their role in their respective part of the state. We're very different east to west. We're unique in our personalities and the institutional personalities and the programs we offer, and take great comfort in knowing that the higher ed institutions in the Commonwealth of Kentucky are very good, and we're serving the needs of our regions quite well. Secondly, I'm going to point out one program, Dr. Thompson, if I could. So quality assurance, QA Commons. Okay, QA Commons is a partnership that we entered into several years ago with the CPE and QA Commons. QA Commons came and did audits would come and do an audit on your university, and they did on some of our respective institutions. And they would look at programs about, are we meeting workforce needs? Are we addressing these essential skills? Are we preparing students for the marketplace? Are we graduating good citizens? And so they would do an audit in all these respective areas. We now have 11 programs that are certified by QA Commons, the most in the country of any institution. Number one, Murray State University. And I'm very, very proud of that work that's been done there over the last several years. So that's one example. And we all have our own stories. And again, all of us represent wonderful institutions. Secondly, I want to talk about the FAFSA for a second. If you can call somebody in Washington, D.C., call them and tell them that it was a debacle. It was a debacle. It hurt the least the most. The issue of FAFSA, we ought to be making it so simple that anyone who wants to go to college can fill it out in minutes and submit it and not have to ask 1,000 questions. We could even get the forms submitted. We were helping families and prospective students constantly. And it's a miracle that many of our institutions are up in enrollment. We've had wonderful years over the last couple of years. Last year was a record freshman class for Murray State. This year is the 4th largest in our 102-year history. But it's not because the FAFSA worked. It's because we worked our tails off to make sure that we were doing everything we possibly could. I'm embarrassed for our country. I really am. It's terrible that we're making it so difficult on students to do something that should be so simple, to see if they're eligible for a Pell Grant or other monies. And we've already been notified that it's not going to open on October 1 as it normally opens, the FAFSA form. It's going to be December 1. And I have this bad feeling when we get to about November 30th, it's going to be March 1. And so we're going to go through this same cycle again as it relates to doing some heavy lifting to make this work. So call all of our friends in in Washington. Call the Department of Education, call the hotline. I know we all have. I know the CPE has. I know Dr. Thompson's been up there. We've been up there. Do everything you can to make this work, because again, the least of us are the ones being hurt the most.
I guess I'll say amen. No, I think that I'll talk about FAFSA real quickly. Dr. Jackson hit all the right points. Just the communication, the lack of execution, something that is so critically important for access and affordability. And for a state like Kentucky, where we have such a preponderance, 51% of my freshman class this year, first generation, largest freshman class in school history at EKU. And Dr. Jackson, you're exactly right, 97% FAFSA completion, because my financial aid team worked tirelessly, individually, in schools, in libraries, in people's homes to make that happen. I don't think we can sustain that going forward. The other thing I'll say to all the trustees and regents out there, kudos to your institutions, because Kentucky looks to be up in enrollment across the board, but it's because your institutions took a risk, because we still don't know when those aid packages are going to pay out. This is the time of year, mid-September, that starts to happen. We've all got our fingers crossed that that's going to process and that's going to happen in the way that it's going to happen. But what I know is that all of our institutions are going to stand in the gap to try to help students to the best of our ability. But it could be a burden that is so big financially, if they don't get their act together, that could be crippling, not just for Kentucky institutions, but truly for all institutions. With you, Dr. Jackson, I'm worried we will repeat last year again this year, and that is they've delayed, and we delay again. We were 6 months behind in packaging aid this year for students. It's why we could not project enrollment going into the fall semester. This affects so much of what we do. Please stay engaged. If you know someone, or say something, because I think it's important. I'll kind of piggyback on the essential skills conversation. We were proud to host a national conference with CPE on experiential learning and student engagement, specifically targeted at trying to bring some really applicable essential skills to the work that we're doing, and really being explicit in talking to employers about making sure that we're filling those gaps, that the students who graduate are there and they're ready to perform on day one. One thing that we're doing at EKU is really kind of a repositioning, reimagining of general education. We believe that, unfortunately, across the nation, when you see general education, what parents and students say is the thing that I need to get through so I can do the thing that I really need to do. And so we are working to reposition general education as essential education on our campus, and really kind of reimagining completely what does that core content look like, what are the skills and abilities and experiences that students must have to leave our institution and be productive when they leave, not just in their careers but in their lives, but also developing an assessment tool that says, if we're going to say that a student has achieved these things, that we have got an assessment by which we can stand on to say they have demonstrated it. Because no one will care as much what you know until they know what you can do. And I think that's a critical component to doing this work and doing it effectively.
I'll just add my thoughts about the fact of, in terms of FAFSA. When you take a look at the impact that it's had this year, there's estimates, depending on the state, that it impacted enrollment negatively, anywhere from 1% to 10%, depending on the state and depending on the region. The problem with that also is it's almost a second COVID attack, in the fact that we're never going to get those students back. They were supposed to come as freshmen. They didn't come because of the fact that they didn't receive the financial aid packages, the communications. And we're going to work hard to get those students to reconsider to come to university, but we all know that's very, very difficult particularly with the fact that these are the most vulnerable students that we're dealing with, often first generation, often Pell eligible to be able to do that. So to have them reconsider after they were going through such a struggle this year, and they found a second alternative. They moved on in many cases, and they've put university and a degree behind them. So it's something that I agree, if we can call and be able to do it, all of our financial aid folks were talking to each other all the time, talking to CPE, using every single best practice strategy that we all figured out. Again, we had record enrollment on the campus as well. You'll probably share tomorrow about how the enrollment in Kentucky has been very, very good this year. But that's despite such an overhang that we had coming from the federal level with regard to FAFSA and the damage that it's done to the students that are graduating, particularly when you put COVID on top of it. Here's kids that had to go through that, and now they have to be able to deal with something and have their families deal with it. So it's very, very unfortunate to be able to see that. But I agree with the fact that our financial aid folks just did a tremendous job, and we're in close contact with each other to be able to figure out what the other institutions were doing and sharing solutions and strategies to be able to do that. And CPE was just terrific, providing us guidance as well. The essential skills, again, in the general education curriculum, it's in our cardinal core to be able to do it, numerous assessments that we're doing. But I really think it's really the employers. We're very fortunate in Louisville, the fact that we are in a metropolitan area where the students can have a lot of internships. There's a lot of access to internships to be able to do that, but to be able to expand their experiential learning. But we've brought the employers in to be able to reinforce the fact that these skills are something we want them to reinforce and to give us feedback on as well. My board of advisors, one of their key projects this year is dealing with internships to redefine and expand that. I feel strongly the fact that the students have to have some type of internship experience to be able to really figure out what they want to be able to do, but it also provides the opportunity for us to reinforce job skills, which is what we're looking to be able to do as part of their education.
So just a few comments. I think that NKU is more aligned and preparing students better for their workforce than ever before. I think that it goes into our daily thinking about what is it we're preparing them for. And if you look into each of our majors, my goodness, they're getting experiences that are rich and high impact, and they're leaving well equipped to succeed. I think the fact that 82% of our 84,000 alumni live and work in our region says that they're not only prepared, but they're landing well. As far as FAFSA, it's pretty much been said, but I'll add two more thoughts. We were up 3%, and I think that if you look at who didn't do well in this season, it's the privates. And it's because they're expensive. And if your financial aid package wasn't coming in time and you had to make a choice, I think people chose us because we're more affordable. Secondly, I would also note that if you know someone in financial aid, be nice to them. It was not an easy season for them. So, thank you.
Let me add a couple other items to this conversation. Just to let you know, on the FAFSA, I have been to D.C. I've talked with secretary, undersecretary, so many times I can't tell you, and over the length of time they've given us different dates all the time. I am worried. If you look at our data, don't ask me for the scientific methodology here because it was done on the back of an envelope. That's a call out to you, Dr. J. Morgan. But anyway, the idea, and I taught statistics in college, and I'm an old enrollment manager, and we looked at how far we were down, and we looked at how many of our people that would have been eligible to apply. We looked at those that went on the campus and hadn't filled out the FAFSA, that had unmet need. If you look at it, even though we're going to talk about we got record enrollments, we are probably still close to 3% down. And you're right, privates are really hurt in many cases for that reason, but so are many of the publics, especially those that are serving the most underserved populations. So the idea that this is a bigger hit on us is true. And I appreciate Kia, I appreciate my staff in Access and Success, or Kentucky Advising Academy, Gear Up. All these people came together. Kentucky had an item in place, and our campuses working together to make sure that we get as many people there as possible. On the graduate profile, I'm proud to say all of our 16 community and technical colleges and all of our four-year institutions that are public are involved in this. Kentucky is leading the nation in talking about employer engagement and these essential skills as a part of our fabric, not just the test you take in the end to say you got it. And Dr. Jackson, I appreciate what you all have done with QA Commons. You're talked about around the nation, so all that's important. Let me open up to you. There's a lot more questions on my page, but these guys talk a lot, of course. They wouldn't let me get to them all. So I want to open it up to you, and I want to take a question or two before I end this panel. Yes, Allie.
I have a question about what you all are seeing students graduate from universities. How many are staying in Kentucky, and how do you all plan to increase this number that stays in Kentucky? Your universities that are based here in Kentucky, that should be one of our main goals, I feel like, once they graduate.
Great question.
I'll jump off because we are number one for our graduates staying in Kentucky and working in Kentucky as an institution. We've had that designation for about the last 6 years running. I think for us that when you look at our degrees and you look at the top employment county by county by county, and Fayette and Jefferson can be a little different because of the diversity of the economy of those two, but from east to west and north to south, our degrees are largely what you see are powering those local communities, from education to healthcare to law enforcement to family services in the home, social work, those types of things. I think that's one of the driving things, but the key for us, and I think we talk about a lot of different needs for the state, is that Kentucky's got to continue to evolve its economy where the knowledge worker, the person with a 4-year degree, that this is a vibrant economy for them to work in. And so it's a hand-in-hand relationship with our policymakers about where are we going as a state. And yes, manufacturing, largest GDP producer in the state. Yes, obviously natural resource extraction has been a big part of our state's history. But what's next? How do we build that knowledge worker? And I think the diversity of our economy will continue to power the fact that our graduates can stay here in the state and be successful. So I think that we've got to make sure that we're looking ahead and making sure the next jobs are also the jobs we're creating as we create economic incentives for the state.
Others that want to answer that question.
If I could just add briefly to that. So I think we're all very intentional in regard to addressing workforce and economic development needs in our respective regions and the state as a whole. And that is key. And so at Murray State, we've been very, very thoughtful and focused in regard to some of the things that we're doing to make sure we are addressing the economy and we are addressing the workforce, and we're keeping those students and those individuals graduating from our institution in Kentucky. We are building a new School of Nursing and Health Professions building. That's not an accident, so we went to the legislature, asked for that so we can grow and expand nursing and health professions program. We're building a new vet sciences program to enhance and grow our multi-billion-dollar agricultural economy in Kentucky and hopefully keep those students in Kentucky as well. We're working very hard on a School of Veterinary Medicine. There's not one in Kentucky, and it's something that we feel like we need, and it's time after all these years of discussion that we need to be focused on that. So I think the key and the point is being thoughtful in regard to whether it's healthcare related programs or other programs, making sure we're addressing what Kentucky needs from a workforce and economic development standpoint.
So Allie Rose is also our SGA president. She always asks really hard questions and good ones. I have to say that as well. We talked about the fact of really developing degree programs that are in high demand for the area in terms of healthcare, education, engineering, STEM programs across the board. But I also think, and this is probably me talking as an entrepreneur, is entrepreneurship. As well as the fact that we have students that want to work for smaller companies. They don't want to work for a big company. They want to work for a startup or one that's 10 or 15 people to it. So this spring we're going to start a program for those smaller firms because they don't have college recruiting arms that come to campus to be able to do that. You know, time is as valuable as money to an entrepreneur, and they just don't have the excess bandwidth to be able to do that. So we're introducing a program that's more or less like speed dating. They come to campus, we line up the students that are interested in working for small companies in the area to be able to do that, and we make the connection. It's just another avenue that we need to be innovative about, making those connections with employers and with what the students are looking for as well.
So Allie, all I would add is that I think that the state has been intentional about creating these pipelines and pathways, HB 200 and other sorts of approaches to really connect workforce and education tightly, which is fantastic for students and for the region that you are earning your degree in. The other thing I would say is that the workforce shortage and the fact that not enough babies were born in 2008, everyone's mindful of really working hard to secure our graduates' futures in the region, right? So they don't want them to leave. So I actually think that we'll see higher percentages in the years ahead because at least our partners in Northern Kentucky are becoming far more aggressive about wanting to really have them intern, co-op, work over the summers, whatever it might be. And as you know, that's the world's longest interview process, and you really get to know each other and know whether or not it's the right place to work. So I see us increasing from 82% up.
I would be,
Let me just
oh,
add.
I'm sorry.
So let me go back to the issue about small firms. I think everybody's aware of the fact that job growth in the United States, that 80% of the job growth in the United States comes from firms with under 50 people. So if we're looking to be able to grow the economy within Kentucky as well as grow the jobs, focusing on those smaller firms is going to be critical to be able to do that. And in all honesty, if you talk to folks that are graduating from college now, they really are attracted to go to small firms where they can make an impact. So I would just encourage for the trustees to take a look at that as an aspect of what you might be doing differently on the campuses. It's not easy, but when you take a look at the payoff, it really is. The ROI is there.
And I just want to point out, Allie, it's important for us to have statewide policies that helps us to keep a significant amount of those out-of-state students in the state to work for us. We won't get to our 60 by 30 without a significant portion, hopefully around 40%. So we're working on those sorts of issues now. We've got it very beneficial to our campuses by attracting those out-of-state students. How do we keep more? So I think it's a very valid question. Speaking of speed dating, we're going to have to speed answer this one. I would be remiss to not bring up, which could be the elephant in the room, that we know some of the national and state politics around anti-DEI is there. It's important. And we've been responding to it in ways that I think could end up being pretty beneficial for us too if we implement correctly. Now, we've been able to produce a lot of good outcomes around gap closing. Speed dating, I'd like for you all to tell us, exactly what your plans are in order to make sure that every student comes to our campus, will want to come to our campus, and that we'll keep them to the point of graduation where they can take part in this economy. Speed answer.
I'll go.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things that we've talked about today is you got to meet the students where they are, and that student success for all of us is a priority, which is making sure that every student that comes to our campus and is admitted gets a degree, that we support them to thrive and reach their fullest potential. Whenever we talk about this, I talk about the 2,300 students that are on our campus that are military connected. That's a 30% growth in 5 years. We support them. We also just added an autism coordinator on the campus. We support them. We talk about distance learners. We talk about rural learners. We talk about adult learners. We talk about the disabled. We talk about students that are coming to campus that are from immigrant groups. We have added some additional resources around ESL to be able to do that. We had financial aid counselors to be able to work with our first generation and Pell-eligible students, because we already talked about the complexities that they deal with in terms of the challenges of financial aid. I view those as all the demographics and the identities that we have on a campus to be able to support. And we need to meet them where they are to be able to provide those kind of wraparound services and support so that we have student success that's inclusive across the board. It's intentional is what it needs to be. And I think all of us agree the fact that student success is the #1 priority that we have on our campuses.
I agree with everything you just said, and we also have added a first-year student success hub at the university where students are introduced to their advisor in their first day or week, and that person stays with them throughout their entire education. So even if they change majors or whatever else, they have a person. It's helpful to have a person on campus where you can ask them anything and they can answer anything. Complicated setups at universities make it really important to have a person, and so that's hugely important. I would also say that much like what Kim was just describing, at NKU we have 223 different student clubs and organizations that are really meant to help students to connect with people who are like them, people who are not like them, people who have similar interests, different interests. I would argue one of the best parts besides learning at a university is just figuring out what turns your gears, what do you get excited about, what are you interested in, what might you learn, and I think that's an incredible opportunity along with the college education itself, is the experience.
I think that, touching on what they've said, same thing here. The credential, the experience on campus is paramount to really students having success. So if you choose Eastern, we choose you. So we're going to help you along that way. We're going to be as individualized in supporting you as we need to be, or we're going to let you spread your wings and grow as fast as you want to grow. And so we're committed to that work, and we're committed to every student. As we think about 51% of our freshman class were first in their family to go to college this year. Over 50% are Pell eligible students. We're serving students who are really blazing a new path, and so we're going to help them try to clear that path at every step that we can help them get to getting that degree, which is truly such a transformative thing in their life.
I agree, and we agree with all the points being made. I think one thing that we could add to the discussion is we talk a lot about recruiting. We talk about a lot about enrollment and numbers. We don't talk as much about gap closing as we probably should, and we do among ourselves, and the CPE does, et cetera. For example, low-income gaps. So the students who come, the lowest income students who come to our university, we have nearly closed the gap on those students, meaning they're retained at Murray State University at almost the same rate as all students. So all students. We talk about graduation rates. We're closing that gap, making sure those students graduate at the same rates as all students. So yes, it's recruiting, it's enrollment, it's providing all the services, which we do. It's having all the offices on our campuses prepared to do that type of work, but also it's making sure these students, all students, are retained, and all students graduate from our institution, and we help them become gainfully employed.
Right now, my staff's hoping I don't do a dialogue, because look at her back there. You know, it's a great thing about being boss. You know, but several things I will say, and I've talked to each of the presidents. The one thing we're not doing is pulling away from our students. We're not doing that. It's important that we understand that a part of what we stand for in higher education, to get people in that have difference in thoughts, difference in learning, difference in a variety of things, that difference we can learn from, that is higher learning. That's what higher education is. So we've got a lot of things in our, what I call in our fabrics on the campuses, that are designed at an individual level and at a systematic level within the campus I'm talking about, not big system, to do that. But one of the things we have to think about is how we're looking at closing gaps, and it's about raising everybody up, and that's what we're doing in Kentucky. All right, we're not bringing anybody down to meet anybody. We're taking everybody up, and there's some we have to do a better job at, and we haven't done nearly as great of a job in our low income as we have needed to, and so we're heavily focused on that. Our representation of the richness of who we are in Kentucky, with those we bring in and those we have, are items that we will always embrace. It's impossible not to do it if you're a higher education professional, and I appreciate these professionals to the right and left of me. I appreciate the job you're doing. We know you are where the rubber meets the road. Once again, I'm just a pretty face. Thank you all.